Welcome back to Lost Legacies. I'm Matt.
And I'm Sam.
We hope you had a good weekend. I hope you got to eat a bunch of Halloween candy. I don't know if there was a lot of trick-or-treating or not, but I hope you stayed safe. Hope you wore a mask, and I hope you're still alive. So
Yeah.
Yep, just wanted to remind you, this show at the time of recording was still called something else, Rewatch, so got to do this little intro. Also, I just really wanted to wish y'all a happy Halloween.
Yeah.
Post-Halloween.
Halloween is a state of mind. You can keep it up all year round. That's what watching spooky movies is for, you know?
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. So Sam, what do you got to talk about?
Just was looking at the comic that I made and thinking, wow, this is a thing that is out there in the world now. It's a thing that exists. It can now be scrutinized and judged by everybody, and that both terrifies me and excites me. So
nice. So where can they find this comic book of yours?
You can find my comic at my writing partner's website. It is www.freakishfilms.com/Quetzalcoatl. And if you need me to spell that, I will be happy to. It is QUETZCOATL. Quetzalcoatl.
Sweet. All right. So go check out that comic. If you haven't voted, vote, because you have like 1 day left as of this podcast premiering.
Yep.
So yeah, we hope you enjoy this. This is episode 4 of Lost. Enjoy.
If there is ever a chance for a Lost revival.
Definitely. Totally. I know, like, Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse said no, like they're not going to be a part of it. But
yeah,
I think ABC would probably be down for it. I don't want to get too far into it, but I think it is possible to do a continuation. I don't know about a prequel or anything, because there's a lot of lore and history explored throughout the show.
Yeah. We talked about this. We talked about our feelings about prequels.
Yeah. It has to be the right show for the prequel. And I think if Lost were a prequel, it would be like a lot of retreading. But I could definitely see a sequel. I wouldn't want to reboot or anything like that. But a sequel, I'd probably be down with, depending on who they get to run it. So today we're talking about Season 1, Episode 4, Walkabout. Ooh. So, Sam, what did you think about today's episode? This was a doozy.
This one was pretty crazy. A little different than, I don't know, it felt a little different than the other 3 episodes that we've had so far.
Also,
well, I mean, I guess it's not too different from Kate's episode, but I feel like Locke was very much like a center figure, both in his flashbacks and in the present day narrative. And I think it's just different because he's seemingly like a much more a multi-layered character, whereas Kate, I feel like Kate, you can, maybe you could sort of say like she sort of like wears her personality like on her sleeve. She's hiding stuff, but you can tell that she's still just like a good person, whereas Locke has been a mystery since frame 1. And you can't really pin him. You don't really know, like you're very unsure, like who is this guy, it's like, and kind of to the point where like, you know, you get to that moment where he opens the box full of knives and everybody just looks, and
Mhm.
yeah, you're kind of like, I'm pretty sure that doesn't belong to Locke, but I also don't know enough about him to dispute that it is.
Mhm. So, just kind of like a summary of the episode. There's actually a lot of stuff going on in this episode that's all pretty related. Unlike episode 3, where it was like one or two main plots and then everyone else was kind of doing their own thing. This episode was more, I guess you could say the main plot was they're trying to hunt boar. The camp is like raided by some boar, um, and they also discover that they've run out of food. This is day 5 on the island, and they're going to need some kind of sustenance, so they go hunting.
Right.
And then, kind of like the side plot is basically the castaways. They need to do something with the bodies, and they know they can't bury them because it's going to get dug up. So they decide to light the fuselage on fire, do a big bonfire memorial, and that's essentially the gist of the episode. But you kind of see how everyone else is reacting to it, which is
Mm-hmm.
nice. And this whole time, like you said, Locke has been a very mysterious figure. They're really going out of their way to push like these archetypes on the characters. Kind of how we talked about last week. Sawyer is the jerk, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
we're slowly seeing that hasn't changed, but we're starting to see this episode as well. Like, oh, okay, this guy actually has feelings. He's a jerk with a heart. Okay. Um, and then same thing with Kate. You know, she's the criminal. She's the criminal. Oh man, we can't trust her. And then slowly through her episode, we start to find out like who actually she is, and this is going to kind of be the reoccurring formula that Lost uses every week. We're going to follow a different castaway and kind of get to know them. And this
Mm-hmm.
week's was Locke's turn. And I mean, just everything about this character. They gave him the scar in the eye. They made him like this hunter, so he has all these blades. He has all this knowledge about seemingly everything. They're really making him mysterious. But then, as soon as we get into his backstory, it's a huge like twist. You know, even the way it starts, they're calling him the Colonel and all this stuff. But you find out like, oh no, he's playing war games in like an office. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
he's just like a guy on a computer getting bullied by his superior who's like 2-3 times younger than him.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really interesting to see how the episode goes, and you're trying to figure out how that guy in the past becomes this guy now on the island. Um, and of course, as it goes on, we start to find out that Locke is actually a very, I don't know if tragic is the word, but you do feel sorry for him. You know, he's painted in this light, which is in a way he's weak. He seems old, even like slightly pathetic the way he views things and relationships and stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he's talking to Helen on the phone, and we're like, okay, cool. And it reveals like, oh, she's like, he's paying like $90 an hour to talk to this girl on the phone, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really something else how they're most characters you start to see, oh, okay, this is who they are. Whereas Locke is like, well, wait a second, it's splitting off. It's doing the opposite. Like the more we find out about this man, the less we know.
Yeah.
Um, and then even at the end, when we find out the big twist, spoiler alert, you shouldn't be watching the show if you haven't seen it yet. Uh, spoiler alert, Locke is paralyzed in some way. You know, he's using his
Mm-hmm.
wheelchair, and that's revealed towards the end of at the very end of the episode, where we find out he's trying to go on this walkabout in Australia. He can't because he's crippled. But here he is on
Mm-hmm.
the island walking around, and I gotta say, man, they've spent so much money on that plane, the wreckage scene. Like they're gonna use it. So when
Oh
it
yeah.
comes back and you see Locke in those first moments of the series again, standing up for the first time, with the music, the score is just so beautiful. Like, oh my god, who is this guy?
Yeah. Yeah. It was. Uh. You know. Any. anybody, could just mistake that shot, in the pilot. If they don't watch anything besides the pilot, it's like they can take that shot and just be like, oh, like this guy's just like dazed, like just getting up out of the plane. But yeah, just jumping to that, to the end of this episode where they show that, yeah, he was in a wheelchair. He was on a wheelchair when he got on the plane, and then the plane crashes and he's able to stand and walk. And it's so, I don't know, like just the juxtaposition of what's happening, this terror going on, Shannon's off like screaming,
Mm-hmm.
and Locke just like stands, and he's, you can tell like he's smiling, and the music is just like super cacophonous against like
Mm-hmm.
the jet engine and Shannon, like like it should
I
be a
love it.
terrifying moment, but it's such a beautiful moment.
I
Yeah.
had to write that in
Yeah.
my notes. Like, it's this scene of carnage, but there's Locke in the middle of it, smiling, almost laughing. You
Yeah.
know, it's this beautiful moment where he's walking for the first time in who knows how long, and
Mm-hmm.
and of course, the first thing he does, Jack's calling him, and he runs off to help someone. I was like, oh
Yeah.
man, like this is that was cool. We're just two guys here making this podcast about this show, right? Um, so it's kind of just our opinions and stuff. Whereas in reality, when the series started, there's so many people watching this show and just loving it, eating it up. After this episode, this is when they got renewed for the full season.
Oh, wow.
And this is when they call it the walkabout effect, because it was like after this episode, the ball started rolling.
Mm-hmm.
As far as being the phenomenon, because everyone loved it and so many people were watching it, but then this is where like a lot of the reviewers and everyone was just like, hey, y'all gotta jump on, everyone needs to start watching it. It just started rolling from there. So I'm gonna do some research on this, but I'm always curious with shows like this, especially something that's this big. I wonder what episode they were recording when the first one premiered, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So technically, the part one of the pilot premiered at Comic Con, um, 2004, I guess. Uh,
Okay.
Everyone loved it. They dug it. Everyone was anticipating this. So I want to see, like, okay, what episode were they filming after that Comic Con?
Mm-hmm.
Just to see, like, I don't know, just to see if there's any difference or if we notice anything different, you know? So I will
Yeah.
look into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I did want to say, like, I think that's uh that's an interesting terminology, the walkabout effect.
Mhm.
Um I always love hearing about that like episode titles from shows end up being co-opted into uh like lingo within the business, like an Angel. Uh the phrase smile time
Mhm.
came from the episode Smile Time, but not necessarily from that. It's from the episode after, which I think is Hole in the World, which is like that's the one in episode in season 5 where like bad stuff really happens to one of the
Mhm.
favorite characters. And so that effect now is called Smile Time, where you have really bright, happy episode, and then next episode super dark.
Wow.
Just like, yeah, traumatizing. Yeah. So I think that's interesting, and it really sort of, this episode feels simple, but just like Locke, it's very multi-layered,
Mhm.
because I feel like there's you're right. It's a very simple episode. It's a very simple premise, but there's so many little things going on, little character details, and then everything to do with like Locke and his character. Like I almost wanted to freeze frame every time we saw the war game board, and then every time we saw his apartment, and those, like, I'm sure like it doesn't really mean anything, but those things have to be placed in a certain way.
Mhm.
And you know, like it's that level of detail. Now my brain is just thinking about that. Like if this is gonna be that type of show, you know, you have to look for the details.
Mm-hmm.
This episode is very simple, but when you take a step back, you realize that like, yeah, this is kind of a game changer, uh both for the characters, but also just like for us as viewers, because the first 3 episodes, like there's this idea that like something is not right with the island. There's polar bears, there's a big monster that sounds kind of different every time we hear it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a signal that's blocking all the other signals that's been repeating for 16 years. Like there's something not right with the island. This is the first episode where we realize that not everything about this island is bad. Or at least,
Yeah, that's a good point. I I think also this is kind of the first time where the twist is actually in the storytelling, not the plot. You know,
yeah,
um, so because yeah, you're right. This whole show was billed as some kind of mystery. There's some kind of supernatural force or something we don't really know from these first 3 episodes. But this episodes, it was the writers who pulled off the mystery. It's like, oh crap! Okay, he was
yeah.
paralyzed, and now he's not. You know, as soon as he crashed, he could walk again. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it just kind of further deepens the rabbit hole that is Lost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one thing I was making note of is how much this episode is all about helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's with the exception of Locke, you know, everyone they're gonna try to they need food. Okay, so let's go hunt. I love that Sun is the one who's looking after Walt. Uh,
Yeah.
Everything, even when I mentioned Sawyer earlier, he returns some of the wallets or whatever that he had stole, you know, for the memorial. Uh, Things like that. The way, and we'll talk about Jack in a second, but the way Jack is like kind of shrugging off any kind of responsibility if it's not doctor related. So Claire's the one who steps up to do the memorial. You know, she wants to do
Mm-hmm.
it. And of course, it's Boone again. He's the one who's always finding different people. He tells Jack, he's like, hey, the lady over there, she needs someone to talk to. I don't know what's happened to her. So Jack goes to help. And that was a cool moment, too, because we actually got to see Jack slow down and just be present. You know, he's not
Yeah.
running around trying to save everyone, even though he is trying to help Rose. Um, it's just kind of there. And that was
Yeah.
such a good and that's not just one scene. It's like 2 or 3 scenes. They keep going back to them. He spent like the
Mm-hmm.
day on the beach with her, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I really like that. It is kind of interesting that Jack is the one who you know, since the beginning he's been the kind of the go-to guy, the guy making the decisions. We've seen him sort of take charge, you know, like he goes, you know, to get the transceiver, you know, he's trying to find medicine to save, you know, the marshal. Like there's so many different things that like Jack is taken charge of, and this is the first episode where we kind of see that like or at least we get the idea that I don't think he wants to be a leader.
yeah, that's where the de facto comes in, you know, for the de facto leader. Like he's actively turning down the responsibilities in this episode,
Mm-hmm.
and not in a way where it's just like like he's a jerk or anything. It's just like, no, he's the doctor. He's like, this isn't. I don't know why you're asking me this. This isn't my field. You know what I mean? And he even tells Boone, you know, talking about Rose, he's like, well, why are you telling me? Like, I'm not a therapist. He's like, well, you're the one who saved her life. He's like, okay,
Yeah.
you know. So I think that's interesting. We're starting to see different layers from him, which is really good, and I'm glad they're doing it early on because so far he is that leader. He is like everyone's rock, and a good reason why so many of them are still alive. So it's kind of good to start to see the human side of him early on. So he just feels more realistic that way, you know?
Right.
So, but what's interesting is how everyone is trying to help someone, even Kate. She's helping Saeed. She's trying to take the transceiver and use it as an antenna. Except for Locke. Locke is going out in the guise of hunting boar to help. But in reality, as we see, it's more for him. He's kind of like testing himself. The fact that like Michael gets his leg gored and he leaves Kate to help him get him back to the beach. Locke's going after that damn boar. So it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Because like the whole episode, it's all been about people helping one another. And then here's Locke going off solo to prove something to himself. Like, okay, this is interesting. Further mystifying this person, like, who the hell is he? How can he walk? All that stuff. And of course, the only other one was Shannon, who is not helping, but she's proving herself to be. I wrote this in my notes, Sam. Maybe Shannon isn't useless after all. Damn it, she tells Boone she's going to catch a fish. So she does. So she manipulates Charlie. She's total like pop princess. Even the way like she's flirting with Charlie when she asks him for the walk, and he's like, okay. And she even does this kind of like skip that she does, which is brilliant. Because she does the exact same thing when Maggie Grace was the daughter in Taken.
Yeah.
And when you see her like running, she does this thing where like she kind of bends over, like she runs shoulders first, which just seems like when you're watching it, like that's such a childlike thing to do. I love it. It's such a good little moment. So she kind of skips like that. I'm like, oh man, poor Charlie. But of course, we cut back later and Charlie has wrangled in Hurley into the plot to try and catch this fish for Shannon. So in the end, because of Shannon's manipulative ways, we got our first Charlie Hurley hangout scene, and I loved it. That's the dream team right there. So thank you, Shannon. And she's so cold too. She's so brutal. She just leaves Charlie there. She's like, "Oh, thanks." And Boone's like, "I'm sorry, man." And then they just kind of walk away. He's like,
"Yeah."
I'm jumping ahead a little bit, so we're not going to discuss it yet. But I understand what you were saying because last week I didn't want our MVP to be like the actor who was the focus that episode. I'm like, because it's kind of easy. But you pushed back and you said, no, you're going to do it. So I was like, okay. And like this week, it's really tough because I was really thinking like, well, who would be the MVP if not, Locke?
Yeah. Because it's, as it's almost like a polar opposite of Kate's episode because Kate's episode is more about her past and, like the things that she's done. And it's not so much about her in the present. She's not a very like she's a very passive character within the context of the last episode, whereas Locke isn't. Locke is very much the one who is like he presents the plan. He's like, "Hey, we need to hunt. We can do it. Like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that." He has the knives. He's leading the hunt, and it's like, okay, like he is very much driving the plot forward. It's also just that we're also seeing his backstory at the same time. That is like it is kind of like a polar opposite of who we're seeing now. Like he's not a leader. He is kind of pathetic, and but he feels something. He feels this pull to do something to prove to himself that like that he isn't just going to let this thing, the fact that he can't walk, he's not going to let that define him. And I think this is kind of him going off is proving that like there's a reason why this happened. And so it's like I think we'll probably get into that, as the season goes on, but it isn't just to hunt boar for these people. Like, there's a reason why he was given this gift back. And yeah, Terry O'Quinn just really sells you on both sides of this guy. And yeah, so yeah, I think who else would be the MVP of this episode? I would just also like to point out, though, that I was considering giving MVP to Rose, simply because, one, she just seems so, like steadfast, and that, like, that I love my husband, and I appreciate what everybody's doing out there, but also everybody else who was in the tail section of the plane, they're probably thinking the same thing about us. And that was the first time in my head I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. That is something to consider. Like, nobody's expecting these people to be alive. So it seems sort of naive to think that the people in the tail section also just are all dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that scene was um I couldn't help but think of, like, man, like Rose, like her situation, and Jack even calls it out. He's saying you're suffering from shock. And she says, "We all are." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I guess you're right."
Yeah.
But when she says that, she starts talking at the end of that where she's saying, "My husband's not dead." You know, it's such a tragic feeling because you're like, "Lady, what are you talking about? What are you thinking?" But at the same time, like, okay, so is this a tragic story or is it more prophetic?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's just this kind of wisdom to her that's like, huh, okay, you're either suffering and going crazy because of what you just went through,
Mm-hmm.
or you know some shit. Because even the way the scene was written, the way it's shot, it's just like, okay, there's more to this. We will address this at some point. It really stands out. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, man, she was awesome. That was an awesome scene. Um, and immediately after that, Jack sees someone standing in the distance in a suit. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder who that could be. Not just
Yeah.
once, because he looks back and the guy's gone. But it
Mm-hmm.
happens again, like almost instantly later. He goes to have a conversation with Kate and he sees the guy again and he just
Mm-hmm.
takes off. Speaking of which, Kate was flirty as hell this episode with Jack. The way she's like, she touches his arm, the way she gets super close, like their height level is such the romantic. It's so romantic because she steps up and she's like always inches from Jack's like permanent 5 o'clock shadow, and she
Yeah.
always has to like look up into his eyes while she's talking.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack is just like all business. He's like, "Yeah, I want to make sure you're okay." Oh.
I mean,
You can kind of see some
yeah.
disappointment every now and then in Kate. You're like, "Damn it, Jack."
I mean, yes, but also just the way he touches her face almost instantly after they come back
Oh
from the hunt,
yeah.
and he's like, are you open? Like he's just looking her out, and I was just like, that's okay, that's a little, we're getting a
Very
little personal.
intimate, man.
Even
That's how
even
you that's
Saeed,
how you surprise someone with a kiss. That's not how you say, "Oh, is your face injured?" I was
yeah,
like, "What the hell?"
yeah. I mean,
Oh
even
man.
Saeed kind of picked up on that when Jack started walking over,
Oh,
and
and
he's
he's
just
just
like,
like, "I'm out."
excuse me, and then he
And they had
walks
a good
away.
moment too. I was thinking, I was like, you know what? I think in Kate and Sawyer would make a good um, couple. I think they're a great team already. That's not. There's no
Mm-hmm.
debate in that. Uh, I think just Kate works with everyone, man, and that might be part of her mystery, especially seeing that she's the criminal on the island. But like, she
Mm-hmm.
just kind of vibes and like she fits in with everyone. Um,
Yeah.
Even Sawyer, like she knows the role she needs to play with Sawyer, and that's different than Jack and Saeed.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool too because Saeed is that middle ground. If you have Jack, who is like I don't know, lawful good. Who knows? Like he's the hero, you know. He just wants to help people, and Sawyer's
Yeah.
out in it for himself, and Saeed's just kind of like in the middle, saying he's like, no, I'm going to help people, but I want to do this right. You know, I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting how he considered burning the fuselage as a waste of time. That was his quote. I have, or
Mm-hmm.
not a waste of time, he said, but I have better things to do than gathering firewood. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now I'm not too sure. Like, I don't know exactly what, like, one, it's been over a decade since I watched the show, so I'm not exactly up to date on Saeed's like culture, religion, and and I definitely don't know like what's a funeral process for that religion. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't know. So it was really interesting that Saeed's the one who calls it out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
I
like
mean, yeah, I mean that's again that's sort of it's Jack being proactive, but he's also kind of shirking the responsibility of like having to deal with maybe like there is a way to take the bodies down, maybe there is a
right,
way that we can properly prepare them and give them a proper burial, and
yeah,
all of that's going to take time, and Jack just doesn't want to deal with it. It's like, no, we just have to burn it,
mm-hmm.
especially after the boars try and get in. So yeah, and but it is interesting that Saeed is the one who first disputes it, and then as soon as the decision is made, uh he just sort of like he just sort of walks out. He's like, okay, like yeah, the next time we see him, he's making like the things to boost the transceiver signal. Like
And so
he's
he's still helping. He's just doing it in his way.
exactly
And
he's like that's their thing. This is how I'm gonna help
mhm.
today.
And here's the thing
Yeah,
about Jack too. Like, it's not really a spoiler because we've definitely seen this so far. But he's the kind of person like he needs something to fix, you know.
yeah,
And I think that's very evident here. Like, okay, if we need to get rid of the bodies, you know. Um, Two, let's build this giant fire at night. Hopefully, someone will see it. Those are all solutions to a problem. A
hmm
memorial isn't, you know. So
yeah,
that's in a way is kind of like, I think that's kind of Jack's mindset. Um, it's not something for him to fix, so he doesn't really see the point, you know.
hmm
So yeah, man, it's interesting. It's like I said, this is the onion episode because we've already met everyone and got little different vibes for them. Um, some more than others, but this is where we start seeing like, okay, a lot of these people aren't, they're real. They got layers. And last time, episode 3, we talked about how there's a lot of opposites in the show. One character
right,
early, you have one feeling for them, and then by the end, it was a different feeling. You know, and it was
hmm
usually something negative to positive. You know, like, oh, okay, I guess this guy does have feelings, even though he's a jerk. You know,
hmm
so that just goes to further like strengthen this episode and the idea that all these people, they're real people. Yes, they're archetypes, but they all have histories and motivations. And as an actor and as a writer, I'm just watching, I'm like eating it up. I was like, oh, dude, this I love it. Onions, man, peeling
yeah,
those onions. I'm crying because I'm
hmm
peeling them onions. So yeah.
oh
One
my
thing we didn't
goodness.
talk about.
Uh-huh.
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Locke sees something in the forest,
Oh yeah,
and
that
we
yeah,
don't see what it is.
he's the I mean, I'm presuming that it's the monster, the thing that killed the pilot, the thing that's been terrorizing, sort of at a distance. I'm gonna I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that it's that, but he like stares it head on
Uh-huh.
and lives to not tell about it.
Yeah. So we don't see him again until later when he's bringing the dead boar back. And then
Mm-hmm.
Michael asks him later, he's like, Kate said it was heading in your direction. Did you see it? And he pauses for a second. He's like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. Oh
It's like,
man.
I don't know.
Okay, just further mystifying the man known as John Locke. Oh, I remember what I was going
Yeah.
to say earlier. Okay, let's
Okay.
talk about his boss Randy for a second.
Oh God. Do
That
we have
guy,
to?
that guy's a dick, man. He's so mean and ageist. Like he's just picking on Locke, probably because he's older and he's still working this crappy job, and he's bald. But it's not till
Mm-hmm.
the twist at the end where we reveal, like, oh, and Locke was crippled the whole time. So this
Uh-huh. So
guy's
this
bullying his crippled employee. I was like, what the
Randy is an
hell?
ableist piece of shit.
Oh my god! Because of course, seeing the episode, I knew that was how it was going to end. I knew Locke couldn't walk before
Yeah.
all this. So I'm watching the episode, and I'm like, it kind of slaps me in the face, like, oh my god, is he picking on a guy in a wheelchair? Oh
Yeah, that's just that's just not cool, man. And yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting. It's interesting that you touched on that because you said that you've seen it before. I knew about Locke.
right. Mm-hmm.
Again, this is one of the things I need to like try and tally all the things that I know about this show so that I can just like be like, okay, now I'm officially out of things to do, which probably won't because I also remember some of the series finale, but
Yeah,
we'll get there when we get there.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so I've known about Locke this whole time. So yeah, this was a real interesting experience for me, sort of seeing how they played that out, how they played into it. And yeah, like you never see him stand, you never see him walk anywhere. He's always in, and he's always in a position where you never fully see his chair
right.
until the moment at the end, where they show that. So
Even at
it is
home,
it's
he's laying in bed.
yeah, he's laying in bed, and
Yeah,
it's not in a position that you know uh, that is out of the ordinary. Like
right.
everybody it's in bed like that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is kudos to the writers and to the director and to Terry O'Quinn for helping convey this. It's like and it's so interesting to see how this all played out. It's like, yeah, God, I wish I could just erase my brain of everything about Lost because that was kind of mind blowing.
Right.
Just to have him, and it's so tragic, to see him being like he has this idol who climbed Everest because it was his destiny and he
Mm-hmm.
did it. And it's like that's the whole reason why he wants to go on this walkabout, to prove that he isn't going to let this define him.
I
His
love that
destiny is
line.
to
I love the line. He says multiple times, "Don't tell me what I can't do." He says it on the island several times, and he says it in the flashbacks as well. And like that
mm-hmm.
sums up that character so well.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I just want to bring up one thing. I love shows that pull you in to this world and make me wonder, what would I do in that position? What would I do?
Mm-hmm.
How would I survive? That's why, for example, I loved Battlestar Galactica, because there's this big sweeping science fiction story, but you still have to take care of the details. There's an episode where they run out of water. When you have the last of the human race flying through space, how do you get water? How do you survive? I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is essentially what Lost is. And this is the first time we kind of see it. Because I think, again, this is one of those things we kind of take for granted in television, because television is so good now. I call it the golden age of TV because it's never been this good. There's been great stuff in the past, but not so much great content at once. And Lost
Mm-hmm.
predates that golden age by several years. Typical Hollywood show, all right, sure, we'll give them some dirty clothes. Sure, little things like this. They don't put the time or energy into the detail effort, whereas this show does. We already talked about Jack's shirt, and like, okay, he wore that white shirt in the first episode and it started getting dirtier and dirtier. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to see everyone's beard growths. And Saeed, when he's working on the radio, his nails are longer.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they're
noticed that.
longer. Like, I'm not watching his nails, but I noticed that they were long. I was like, oh, okay, that's a cool detail. Sun mentioning, well, she speaks another language, but she's explaining to Walt what she's using for toothpaste. It's like, oh, bingo, that's a good one. I was like, okay. In The Walking Dead, I've always known I would die because I wear contacts.
Oh, yeah.
And even if you have all the contacts in the world, you can't use them if you don't have contact solution. So I'm screwed.
Exactly.
I'm going to have to find some glasses. Crap.
Also, you can't you can't put you can't touch your eyes when you're when your hands are dirty. And
that's how I would become a zombie. I would have like walker blood on my fingernail, and it's going to get in my eye, and I'm going to turn.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have the same problem. So it's like, I think we would be a little messed up here if anything happened to our glasses,
right?
Like, because we at least I travel with both like contacts, and then like anything happens to my contacts, I have my glasses,
right?
But,
yeah.
So like as long as I have one or the other, I think I'll be okay. But like I'm just kind of I'm just so worried about that all the time.
So here's my thing. I know I would die in Walking Dead because of that.
Sure.
And it would be something stupid. It's like, I'm not afraid of Negan. I'm not afraid of the walkers. I'm afraid of, running out of contact solution. Lost, all those problems still persist. However, if Locke can mysteriously walk on this island, I'm hoping I crash on that island and I mysteriously have 20/20 vision. Oh, I can see everything.
I'm never leaving. Right? I'm never leaving the island. That's it. I'm like, guys, I don't care.
Oh, man, we'll podcast from the island. There's a radio somewhere.
Exactly.
That's something that's interesting that we mentioned, how Kate is taking Saeed's radio and transceiver to try and use it as an antenna. His whole thinking is if he adjusts it and fixes it in the proper way, they'll be able to track down the source of the signal. So we know from episode 2 that there's a signal, a distress call, being played from the island for 16 years. For that to happen, you need a power source. So Saeed and Kate are trying to triangulate where on the island that power source is. Again, that's another step of survival. I'm like, oh, I love it. Okay, let's go find this. Maybe it's a radio tower. Who knows? But it's a signal from somewhere. So I love that. I dig that. I love how the big drama of this episode that kind of kicks things off is we're running out of food. So this whole time they've been eating the plain dinners. Now they're out. It's like, well, crap. What do we do now? So they start hunting. Also, I think it's just called Lostpedia. I don't know. Just look up Wiki Lost and you'll find it. I used to follow this site like crazy when the show was running, and it's gone through several different like moderators, so it's changed. But I think I found it today. It's still there. There is the Lost timeline. Now we're not going to get into it too much because Lost is pretty wacky when it comes to timeline. However, you can see they have it marked day by day everything that happens on the island. So I was kind of curious. So before I watched the episode, I looked it up. I was like, oh, okay. Episode 4, they're starting. It starts on the night of the 4th night there. And it takes place during day 5. So I'm such a nerd. I'm such a geek. I'm like, okay, they've been there a couple days. And I'm watching. I'm like, oh, it makes sense. They're out of food. This is day 5. Okay.
Yeah.
So like all these kind of things like are just like adding up to me. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Because you could be damn sure, Sam, when I was watching the show, I was trying to figure out, before that timeline existed, I was trying to figure out how long had they been on this island. Okay. So, and there's, once the show gets further on and gets deeper into the seasons, there'll be more references coming in here and there, and you'll kind of start to get a timeline, So if you think about it, episode 4, this is already a month into airing, and it's only been 5 days for them.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see the time difference, because there are some, references going on. It's like, oh, all right. It's gonna kind of one is gonna kind of date the show a bit. This is a mid 2000 show. You're like, oh yeah, that's when it took place.
Sure.
So it'd be interesting. But let's go to MVPs. We already mentioned it, but are you going with Terry O'Quinn?
I am going with Terry O'Quinn.
Okay. I will say this. I'm going to look it up right now.
Oh my goodness.
It's written by David Fury. I don't know who that guy is. Do you know who David Fury is? Oh, he's done a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, he was pretty instrumental in like early Buffy and early Angel, I want to say.
Yeah, Buffy seasons basically 2 through 7, Angel all of it.
Yeah, I think at some point he, like, while Whedon is still showrunner for Angel, he's the one who's kind of taking the reins and sort of developing that. Because if I remember correctly, he does the episode in season 1 where they talk about Angel, where they like fully go into him, like, oh yeah, he's a vampire with a soul. And spoilers for people who haven't seen Buffy yet.
Yeah,
it's from 1997 though, so like, get on it. You had your shot. But yeah, like he's credited, I think, for doing story and teleplay for the Angel episode. So he effectively sort of like created Angel. That's pretty rad. That's pretty interesting.
I guess we'll go with him because basically I want the MVP to go with whose idea was to keep the wheelchair stuff hidden. Even the whole meet cute between Charlie and Claire, which was last episode or episode 2, they're using the wheelchair to move wood, and Charlie even says, "Well, look on the bright side. Whoever needed this is probably better off than we are."
Yeah,
I'm like, oh crap, yeah. So I'm gonna give it to David Fury and maybe even Carlton Cuse.
Okay.
I'm sorry, David Lindelof. Because it's tough, because it's like, okay, something like this can't be something that like the writer just comes up with, This is a significant character moment that's going to affect this character for the whole series, So I'm really curious where this idea came from. Was this a showrunner thing or the writer's thing? You know what I mean? For the sake of it, let's give it to David Fury.
All right.
Okay, that sound good?
Yes.
All right, David Fury, wherever you are, you get our MVP. That's one for you, buddy. So upon looking this up, it does say, of course, like what I mentioned earlier, after this, the series got opened up for a full series. But even Damon Lindelof went on and saying, like, this show was always billed as something, as a mystery, and it was long term. This is something you need to stick with. It's not just a drop in every other episode type of show. And they said this was kind of a litmus test to see how this would go, to see if it would work. And everyone loved it. They loved the twist. And it kind of kept people on, and they were like, okay, I'm on board. Let's see where this goes. All right, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
He's in a wheelchair now, he's not. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, and again, I think what gives it that staying power, and I think what really helped, was the fact that it was something that wasn't dark. It wasn't something scary or terrifying. It was something that, like, you wouldn't even think about. It was something that kind of gave hope, and it restored this man's sort of purpose, I guess. He realizes now that, like, wow, like I'm given this gift that means something, like the fact that something joyful came out of this terrifying experience. Like, I think you can argue that, like, the last 3 episodes have been sort of like this traumatic event. This is one of the first times where it's like, positive things come out of the things that have happened. So I think that's what I think that's a key part of it too, is that it is something, positive that came out of this experience. And I think that is part of the reason why this episode succeeded and blew everybody away, and then essentially like paved the way for the rest of the show.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the show itself is never, at least to this point, it's never been dark. But yeah, these are dark topics they're discussing. So I'm glad you mentioned hope, because that is something that has a place in Lost. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of the first time we see that. Like you said earlier, maybe this is the first positive thing they've got from this island. And it's like, okay, all right, so this is weird. And to me, that's what makes it cool. It's easy to just throw scary stuff somewhere. There's a monster out there. It's moving trees and killing pilots. That's scary. But to have this, for lack of a better word, a miracle happen to this man, that's where it's like, oh, okay, that's like biblical level stuff. And I'm like, okay, it opens up your mind to everything. Is like, okay, is this like a good and evil thing on this island, or is it just kind of like a benevolent type thing? Like, what is it? And to me, that's where the adventure comes in. That's where the exploration. At this point, I'm like, oh hell no, I'm going to survive. But now it's like, okay, I want to see more of this island. What more does this island have to offer?
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to what's coming next, to see what happens. So
I am too. I'm also a little curious, and I kind of want this to be like my end note, at least for this episode. Jack, who posed the question to Kate about why she's always running off to every expedition, why she's always going. She doesn't really answer that question. Saeed sort of starts that conversation in saying that, what does he say? It's something along the lines of, something about getting off the island, like just like, so you really want to get off the island too. And Kate kind of gives him a look at that, especially after everything we know, which Saeed doesn't know. I think a majority of the people don't know, is that, Kate has a criminal past. She was on the run. So it's like, when he asks that and she gives him that look, it's sort of like Kate doesn't want to leave the island. At least I think this is sort of like the beginnings of that. Like, I don't think she really wants to leave. She wants to like help everybody else. Obviously, she wants people to get off the island, go back to their lives. But I think that's an interesting question that's now been asked. Like, are there going to be people who don't want to go back, who don't want to return to their lives? And especially with how this episode ends, everything we know about Locke, that's now, I feel like, at the forefront of his mind, that like, yeah, sure, everybody else leave. This is a special place and I'm not going to leave.
Right.
And so I think later, this is sort of part of my prediction, but I think this is going to be this is the start of lines sort of being drawn as to like, how proactive are we actually going to be with finding a way home, and how proactive are we going to be just finding out more about the island.
Right.
Yeah,
man, I mean, that's absolutely right. We're just gonna have to see what happens next. I can't wait.
Yeah.
And I'm excited too, because like I'm seeing it for the first time through your eyes now. So that's I'm really pumped.
Peter Gabriel style, in your eyes.
The Dominic Monaghan, you can see his Lord of the Rings tattoo in one of the shots where Jack is like patching him up.
Oh man,
and I
missed it.
I was like, oh, that's cool, nice. But it's in Elvish. And then also, Dominic Monaghan had to basically ingest brown sugar. That's what they were using for his drugs, the heroin.
I was gonna ask what that was. Okay.
Now it's kind of tough to see because they always cut. Since it's on ABC, you can't actually show someone doing drugs. That's why usually it cuts and like his fingers in his mouth or something like that.
Right.
So it's always hard to see, but like it's brown sugar.
Okay.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I saw a trivia that this was the first time we actually learned Claire's name when she's talking to Jack.
No, I don't. Oh, huh.
Because I even made the note. I'm like, wait a second. This is day 5, and your doctor is just now learning your name. You're the pregnant
she also
girl. You should be the priority.
Yeah. Well, she also calls him doctor, and he has to say,
oh, hi, patient. How's the baby?
Yeah.
That's on Jack. Come on, Jack.
Yeah. I mean, he's
one. I could have swore we heard earlier because I know like Claire has some scenes with Charlie in the past couple episodes. I feel like we've heard her name before, but just the fact that Jack didn't know her name, it was just bonkers.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Come on, Doc. But okay, so we did our MVP. Let's talk about some predictions here. First, we'll go through the previous ones. Okay, Sam's predictions. Time travel? Nope. Giant metal dinosaur? Nope. Group Kumbaya? No, but they did have a bonfire, so
they had a bonfire and a memorial service, which is a form of bonding. I'll half count it.
I'll give you a half point and
say that. Yeah, because it's a bonding experience, but it's not a really positive one.
Yeah.
So.
I should be checking these out because I don't remember which one's already gone through or not. Epic gunfight with Kate? Nope. Hurley bonds with an unexpected castaway? No, but we kind of counted last week's episode because he kind of very and frighteningly hangs out with Kate.
Right.
Locke is still not Professor X so far.
I mean,
he could be now.
He was in a wheelchair. And now he's walking, and
casual cannibalism still hasn't happened. However, your second prediction from last week was a new mysterious facet of the island, which is just so open-ended enough. I'm gonna count it.
I had a feeling. I'm not gonna lie. That was a little bit of a meta prediction because I knew what this episode was, but.
Which is a good point too.
Also,
because had you seen this episode before?
No.
Okay, so we're in brand new territory now. Everything going forward.
Yes.
So we're in it now, Sam. Point of no return.
Oh yeah. Okay. Point of no return. I do remember like walking in on bits as the show was going on. I remember like the end of some episodes being like, "Huh, that's interesting," and then just forgetting about it. But. As far as now, this is the furthest into Lost I've ever ventured.
Ooh. Wow. All right. Okay, so I'll give that to you. So what about new predictions going forward? What do we got?
Let's see. Okay, I don't know. I don't know anything about this next episode. I saw on Hulu that it was called White Rabbit. I'm gonna predict that it is not about the former dive bar here in San Antonio. That is no longer called the White Rabbit. I am going to predict though that it is about Jefferson Aeroplane's White Rabbit. And let's see. I'm wondering how these episodes are going to play out. Like, because I know for sure that not everybody gets an episode. At least as far as I know.
I don't know, Sam. I will say season 1 is 24 episodes.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
So
maybe I'm wrong then. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just Okay. Let's think about this.
So what were you gonna say? Did you think did it have to do? You think someone wasn't gonna get screen time, or?
No, it was mostly just that we were going to focus on a female character for the next episode.
Mm.
Just because I was curious if there was gonna go in that like alternating like boy girl
Mm-hmm.
Binary, but I won't say that.
Yeah.
So what I will say, okay, so it will involve Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit, and I don't know. I'm just gonna say that Sawyer is going to be even more antagonistic and also ruggedly charming at the same time in this episode specifically. That's not going to be open for the rest of it because I feel like that's always going to happen. But I feel like just this one, it's going to be more of that. We're going to see more of Sawyer being a handsome jerk. So
okay, all right. Well,
yeah,
we'll
that's all I got.
So next week, we're going to do season 1, episode 5, White Rabbit. So again, I'm paraphrasing a lot here because I don't want to give spoilers, which are a ton out there. But
sure.
Next week, the water supply runs dangerously low, a situation that erupts into violence when someone steals the last remaining water bottles.
Uh-oh.
That's all I say for that one.
I was thinking about that too when you talked about Battlestar and they were talking about they had the episode where they need to get water. I was like, this feels like a show where that would probably come up. And yeah, cool. Dang it, I should have predicted that.
Yeah. So we'll see. There's a lot of things left open in this episode. Pretty much the entire character of Locke. I guess you could say Rose hinting at more survivors somewhere. Again, we don't know if that's a tragic thing or prophetic. Like, we don't know how likely that is. It doesn't seem likely at all. But they're starting to open up all these little things.
Yeah.
They're starting to open up all these like little clues maybe, or just red herrings they could be. Who knows?
Oh yeah.
But a big one from this episode was Jack seeing like Rod Serling off in the distance, the man in the suit.
I was like, really? Is that Rod Serling?
Imagine your plane crashes on an island and you learn to walk. So I think we're going to have, here's my predictions. Next week is going to get funky.
God.
I don't know what that means. It just means it's going to be more weird stuff on the island. So
yeah,
that's my prediction. But I think that's good for now. I'm glad that you love this episode. I think it's pretty generally seen as one of the best Lost episodes, just because it is. It does feel in a way feel more like an introduction to what's important, because it does offer this, like you predicted, a new facet to the island that we weren't expecting. So yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of moments like that over the next 6 seasons, and I can't wait to do it. So until next time, I'm Matt. You can find me on the socials at _Matt Jimenez, I believe, and Instagram at Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch.
And I have been Sam. You can find me on the socials, Twitter and Instagram at Reel, that's REEL, Texas Weirdo.
All right, until next time, take care, guys.